I'm going to go to Lori next. Lori, tell me a little bit before we get into things, a little bit more about your membership. Can you roughly tell me how many processing companies make up your universe there?
Sure. We represent the major shoreside processing companies on the West Coast. That's Washington, Oregon, and California. We have 7 major companies in the association right now, along with several smaller processing operations and some, owner-operated small fish houses and things like that as well. Our companies are American-owned, multi-generational, in some cases, multi-generational family-owned operations. We have mom and pop operations all the way up to, vertically integrated companies with multiple distribution facilities. Our companies here on the West Coast participate in the West Coast fisheries. So those are the fisheries that are harvested off of California, Oregon, and Washington, as opposed to the North Pacific. But we're highly diversified companies, and we participate in just about every fishery on the West Coast, state and federal. So that's pink shrimp, Dungeness crab, rockfish, whiting, albacore tuna, salmon, ground
You're making me hungry. It's lunchtime. Well, tell me a little bit about how you guys did through the pandemic. How are you guys handling things now? Things are in motion, it seems. How are you doing?
Well, things are in motion. Things have evolved. I wouldn't say that we feel like we're on the other side of this fully yet. We're sort of into the next phase of it, I guess. This has been a really, really tough time for the seafood processors. We're at the land-sea interface. I try to remind people about that when it comes to seafood processing. So we have to deal with all of the struggles and challenges and regulations that Leigh discussed in terms of the harvesting sector. But we also deal with all of the sort of land-based challenges. And that includes things that affect the viability of all of our coastal communities, housing, taxes, wages, labor. That's something I did want to talk about today. We've really had some struggles lately with labor. So, yes, we are seeing a light at the end of the tunnel. We've had some good forward progress with vaccinations and sort of starting to see the country reopen. But I think we have a long way to go in order to sort of pick up the pieces from the disaster that we created through this pandemic.
Right. Well, let's get into that. Talk to me a little bit about some of those issues, especially those that are policy related, that could be that are created by policy or could be solved by policy.
Sure. One of the things that I did want to focus on, because it is one of our current challenges, is the struggles that we're facing hiring and retaining workers right now in our facilities. Just about a quarter of all American U.S. seafood processing and seafood wholesale jobs are located in Washington, Oregon, and California. It is the area that has the largest employment opportunity with the Pacific Northwest, obviously, for any of our industry in the United States. So, we struggled, obviously, with the collapse of the restaurant markets, with the closure of the country when the pandemic hit last year. And right now, as the country and the world are beginning to reopen, we're facing major labor shortages, and along with increased costs and transportation challenges. But the labor shortages that we're feeling just go all the way up the supply chain. And it goes really from the seafood processing plant, to the warehouse, to the truck drivers, and right through to the restaurants, who right now cannot even find enough cooks to go back to full service menus. And this is sort of a ripple effect for our entire industry. I think our problem right now with hiring and retaining labor is generally twofold. We are not seeing a return to work from our local and nearby surrounding communities. And we are also struggling to bring in seasonal workers because of slowdowns and delays from the pandemic. Labor costs are going up. And finding people to do these jobs is challenging because these are not easy work environments. It's not an easy job. It pays really well. But right now, we're, I think, competing a lot with the government in terms of trying to get people back to work. From the CARES Act and the Coronavirus Response Act, we, saw a lot of unemployment benefits be distributed federally and to the states. And here on the West Coast in particular, our West Coast states are providing additional unemployment benefits. And it is just making it really difficult for us to bring our workers back to work. I looked up the unemployment benefits in the state of Oregon, and just as an extreme example, I did the math, and currently in the state of Oregon, if you're on the high side of the unemployment benefits, you can make close to $1,000 a week on unemployment, which is $49,000 a year. That is very difficult for us to compete with. This has been a major challenge for us as we are entering our whiting season, our Pacific hake season, which here on the West Coast is our biggest volume fishery. We started on May 15th, and currently we're not operating at capacity simply because we can't. We cannot bring in enough workforce to operate at full capacity right now. So
how important, let me stop you for a second. How important is whiting in terms of all the species that you guys work with? Is that one of the more important species?
Yeah, whiting, it's our highest volume fishery. And I would say for many of our companies, it's a bread and butter fishery. It's a real critical component of our year-round profile. The whiting fishery runs May to October, essentially, November. But one thing about our companies, we are not seasonal companies. We operate year round, and we do have, our whiting season, which is our busiest season, but we are trying to keep our plants open and operating on a year round basis. So we're looking for year round employment, just as much as seasonal. We're going out to job fairs. We're having Zoom meetings at high schools, to talk about summer employment opportunities. We're recruiting in newspapers. We're offering hiring incentives and bonuses, retention incentives and bonuses. We're using all kinds of non-traditional methods to try to recruit people back to work. This is just a challenge, I think, when this, it's been an evolution through this pandemic, and we've sort of had one crisis after another. I don't think that a year and a half ago, we anticipated we'd be coming out of this facing the labor shortages and sort of the crisis around that we are.
Do you have any idea how many employees there are in your group, among your members? How many total employees there are, total workforce?
Well, the number does vary seasonally, but across our total workforce, it's multiple thousands, up and down the coast. When the fisheries are all operating at max capacity, it's 4,000 or 5,000 people in the plants, not to mention, the warehouses for distribution and things like that.
Do you have any idea what percentage of the normal number of jobs you would have are currently not filled?
That's a good question. I don't have an idea across the board. Again, it's variable by area. It's variable by facility in terms of what their focus of production is. I think for whiting, at this point, our whiting plants are lucky to be operating at half capacity right now. We're all doing the best we can to bring in more workers, and we literally are recruiting and employing people on a day-by-day basis. So, it's changing as much as we can make it change.
All right, so we kind of know the policy issues that help get us to this situation. What could change to help you get out of this situation?
Well, I mean, again, it is sort of a twofold problem. Our biggest problem is bringing the local and surrounding workforce back to work. So we are looking at, anything we can do, any legislation, policy, or efforts to reopen the country, reopen our restaurants, and get everybody back to work at full capacity, 100%. I mean, that's really where we're focused now, is getting people back to work and reopening our country. The second aspect of that is the seasonal workforce and the workforce that we bring in through H2B, which we do rely in part on, especially during the whiting season. So yes, immigration reform and flexibility in the visa process and increase in the number of visas per year, those kinds of things would help us greatly temporarily. But those things for our purposes are temporary, and they're uncertain. They're not things that we can count on. The visa system's a lottery system. You don't know how well you're going to do year to year. So it's not something that we want to rely on. What we want to be able to rely on are our year-round workforce that we recruit from our communities and from the surrounding areas.
I've almost got you at your the total 15 minutes that I promised you, but is there any particular legislation sitting out there that you guys are watching closely, interested in, hoping for?
Well, I mean, on this particular issue, it's such a big issue. We're kind of watching all of it and hoping for anything that will get us towards getting folks back to work. I mean, there's so many other issues. We're watching everything. It's hard to point out just one. And I know I am out of time. I can't believe I spent my whole time talking about the labor issue.
I know you wanted to cover a number of topics.
A whole bunch of other things to cover, but
I'm
that's
sorry,
okay.
I kept you on labor the whole time.
That's totally fine. Thank you.
All right. Well, let's go.